everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and we've just watched WWE Super Showdown in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Now, the most important thing to say, first of all, is thank you so much to everybody who donated to our live stream, because all of the proceeds are going to Amnesty International, and we're pleased to announce that we raised a significant amount. So thank you so much to everybody. Now, let's talk about the show. There were some alright matches, there were some long matches, there were some slow matches, there were some funny bad moments, you know, moments that are so bad you kind of laugh, but there was one match in particular that wasn't even funny bad, it was just quite sad to talk about. But we'll get to all of that in good time, because right now let's take a look at everything that happened at WWE Super Showdown 2019, not the Australian one, the Saudi Arabia one. So we started things off with one match on the pre-show, the Usos versus the Revival. There wasn't too much to report here. It actually ended up, I think, probably on balance being one of the stronger matches of the night. The standard wasn't too high, clearly, because nobody wanted to be busting their asses trying ridiculous spots or anything for this kind of show, but it was a decent opening match. The crowd were hot for it anyway, and it was between two very trustworthy teams. In fact, I do want to take a second to talk about the crowd. It was really interesting to see their reactions. I guess it was the same for the Greatest Royal Rumble and for Crown Jewel, but it was most evident, I think, for this show, the fact that really work rate did not matter when it came to the crowd reactions. They didn't really care about how good the wrestling was in front of them, but rather who was in the match. They reacted way bigger for either popular modern stars like the Usos, for example, or more specifically older names like Triple H, Randy Orton, Goldberg and The Undertaker. So that's the kind of crowd we had here, which made for a strange atmosphere, because you could be watching something thinking this isn't very good at all, and the crowd would be just off their feet for it, chanting this is awesome, or on their feet for it rather, chanting this is awesome. Then on the other hand, you could have more decent matches, I guess, that were just greeted with silence or near silence. It was a very strange one indeed. But yeah, the Usos and the Revival did their thing. They worked a pretty decent match. The Revival used some of their classic heel tactics, like distracting the ref when there was a roll-up going on, so the Usos got a visual pinfall, but the ref didn't actually count it. But the Usos did eventually get the win after just a big old super kick party, a big bunch of super kicks for everyone, but more specifically for Dawson and Wilder, who did suffer a loss because of said super kicks. Next up, the first match of the show, the Universal title match between the champion Seth Rollins and the challenger Baron Corbin. Now, the fact that this opened the show actually carried shades of WrestleMania, where we saw Rollins versus Lesnar open the show, and that made everyone think, hang on, Seth could actually win this. And then, of course, he went on to do so. The fact that Super Showdown opened with Rollins versus Corbin did lead everyone to think that, hang on, maybe Lesnar is indeed going to successfully cash in here. It was a bit of a hairy, scary situation. The match itself felt really kind of like a Raw match, basically, as did quite a few matches on the show, but this was maybe the starkest example of that. They wrestled all right, you know, against each other. They didn't go for anything particularly outrageous, but everything was decently crisp and decently put together. The finish, though, was a bit different and a bit strange and a little bit house showy, and kind of, I guess, adds fuel to the argument that these Saudi Arabia shows are basically glorified house shows. Corbin was really getting on the referee's back. I think it was John Cone throughout the match, getting more and more frustrated because he couldn't put Rollins away, and eventually Corbin got so much in John Cone's face that the ref lost it and shouted back at him. I'm not sure if he actually laid hands on Corbin or not, but he certainly distracted him enough for Rollins to sneak up behind and get the win with a cheeky roll-up. Aggrieved at the result, or the manner of his defeat, I guess, Corbin then attacked Rollins afterwards and hit him with the end of days, and that was the cue for Brock Lesnar's music to hit, and for Big Brocky himself, and for Paul Heyman, of course, as well, to head on down to the ring with briefcase in hand. Then we got one of the strangest cash-in attempts I can ever remember. The important thing here as well is that the cash-in was never actually completed, so Brock is still in possession of the Money in the Bank briefcase. He has not burned his cash-in, but he wasn't successful in even attempting to cash in, let alone actually taking the title from Seth. The reason for this is that as Lesnar got in the ring, Heyman went to join him and slipped as he got in, and we thought it was an accident at first. Adam Pacini was delighted, he thought it was hilarious, but it actually turned out to be part of the storyline, part of the plan. Heyman slipped, dropped the briefcase, this distracted Brock, and that left him wide open to a big low blow from Seth Rollins. Seth then beat Lesnar down and finished the job with a curb stomp onto the briefcase and then got out of dodge. So Lesnar didn't successfully cash in, but he does still have the briefcase because he never actually handed it off to a referee. Next up, the IC title match between, well, not just Finn Bálor, but the demon Finn Bálor and Andrade, his #1 contender opponent. This was one of the more predictable matches on the show, even for a show like this where a lot of the matches were quite predictable. This one was maybe the most predictable of all, simply because Demon Bálor doesn't lose, especially on the main roster. He may have lost in NXT as the Demon, but I actually I'm not confident in saying that. Certainly on the main roster, the Demon is undefeated. Again, I don't feel confident saying that. No, I'm pretty sure that one's correct. In terms of sheer work rate, I reckon this may have been the best match on the show, which is a shame because the crowd just weren't particularly into it. They loved Bálor's entrance as the Demon and everything, but as the match wore on, and they were hitting some pretty good moves on each other and it was paced pretty well, but as the match wore on, the crowd did kind of die away. Eventually, Finn Bálor got the victory, as we all expected, with the coup de grace and is still the IC champion. I wish I had more analysis to give, but it was just a decent match, probably the best on the show, between two very good wrestlers, and Finn Bálor retained his title. Next up, right, okay, all of the Saudi Arabia shows so far have thrown up a handful of ridiculous or strange moments, and this one was no exception, and maybe the most ridiculous of all was this match. Roman Reigns versus Shane McMahon, and Shane, of course, was accompanied by his hired gun, Drew McIntyre. Shane got the upper hand from the opening bell. He got the jump on Roman because Drew was distracting him from the outside, and then just dominated Roman Reigns for large portions of the match. Shane was in control and on offense for the vast majority of this one, and it was just ridiculous to see, to be quite honest with you. I mean, yes, Shane wasn't totally in control off his own back because Drew kind of interfered and distracted once or twice, but not enough to justify it. This is Roman Reigns we're talking about. This is the guy you've pushed as basically John Cena for the past 5 years, and here he is getting absolutely dominated by a man who ironically calls himself the best in the world, because he's not. I didn't know what to make of this. Like, I was shocked with how this match went down. I thought there'd be far more interference from Drew. Maybe the appearance of some of the other hired guns that Shane's got, like Elias or Lashley, but no, it was just Drew doing one or two things, but Shane, by and large, grinding Roman down, hitting his signature moves, whapping on headlocks and rest holds and that sort of thing, and just methodically breaking down one of the most heavily pushed superstars in WWE history. But it was alright, of course, in the end, because Roman made his big comeback and won, didn't he? No, not at all. That's not what happened. Shane evaded the spear. There was a ref bump or a distraction from Drew or something. I think it was a bump. I think the ref took a slight bump, and that led to Drew getting in the ring, blasting Roman with the Claymore kick, and Roman was out cold, and Drew got out of there. The referee recovered, and Shane fell on top of Roman and pinned him to defeat the big dog. Shane McMahon has had maybe, I can't think of any other obvious examples off the top of my head, Shane McMahon has maybe had the most dominant victory over Roman Reigns I've ever seen. And that's kind of disregarding the finish, I suppose. But for the majority of the match, even when Drew wasn't involved, Shane McMahon had the upper hand. Shane McMahon is harder and tougher and more skilled than Roman Reigns. That's the message we were given here. Shane then celebrated on Drew's shoulders afterwards, and they posed on the ramp, and Shane went like this, and fireworks went off in the background, and I was just like, I can't quite believe that this is happening. I was beside myself, so you can only imagine what Ross's reaction was. It was quite loud. Next up, Lars Sullivan in a 3-on-1 handicap against all three members of the Lucha House Party, Gran Metalik, Kalisto, and my boy, Lince Dorado. And to be honest with you, this was one of the more frustrating matches on the show, I think it's fair to say. Basically, the story of this match, it wasn't particularly long. All three members of the Lucha House Party took turns tagging in and getting beaten up by Lars Sullivan. But eventually they worked their way back into the match, and just when it looked like the Lucha House Party were getting the upper hand, the referee disqualified them because they weren't adhering to his rules. They weren't getting on the apron when he told them to. And eventually, the ref just had enough and went, right, that's the DQ, and Lars Sullivan picked up an unimpressive victory, which is a really strange decision for someone they seem so interested in pushing as a dominant monster. And yes, Lars got his heat back by beating up all three members of the Lucha House Party on the ramp afterwards, but this result really didn't help anybody. Like, not at all. It didn't help the Lucha House Party, it didn't help Lars, the crowd didn't help any of the guys in the ring because they were totally dead for this entire match. And yeah, it was a low point on a show with several low points. It wasn't the most extreme low point, but it was certainly like the flattest moment, I want to say, of the entire show. Next up, we had Triple H versus Randy Orton, right? Just a quick disclaimer before I talk about this, right? I love Triple H. He's my childhood favorite. I think he's hilarious and great. Randy Orton, I think, gets too much stick, and I think that over the course of his career, he's proven himself to be an absolute natural in the ring. And yes, he's occasionally been accused of being slow and boring and overly methodical, but I think when Randy Orton's on form, he moves so gracefully, and he's absolutely fantastic. I like both of these guys, right? I do, but I did not enjoy this match one little bit. Over the course of the past 7 days, we've seen Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole and Shingo Takagi versus Will Ospreay, and those have been two of the clearest match of the year candidates you could ever hope to see. Absolutely amazing matches, absolutely amazing wrestlers. This match was not that much. This match was 25 minutes long, and it dragged and dragged and dragged, and it was wrestled at such a frustratingly slow pace. And it was one of those ones that was weird because the crowd were fully into it. We were getting "this is awesome" chants. We were getting cheers. The crowd didn't die away at all. It was really intriguing to see how differently the Saudi Arabian crowds operate to Western crowds that we're more used to, I guess. So yeah, there were attempts at finishes that were reversed. There were the signature spots like the draping DDT or Triple H's high knee, but they were spaced out so much and there was so much stalling in between. There was also a bit of announce table action and everything, but no one went through it. Triple H basically slammed Orton onto the announce table, I think like 4 times in a row or something. Both men kicked out of each other's finishes. Triple H kicked out of the RKO, then Orton kicked out of the pedigree, which was a decent false finish, I guess. I bit for it, but also I just quite wanted the match to hurry up and be over with. And then eventually Randy Orton got a second RKO out of nowhere and picked up a fairly surprising victory in my opinion, but one that wasn't satisfying in the slightest really. The only satisfying thing actually was that Triple H brought his trike along for his entrance. He had a big bicycle entrance and both guys had loads of fireworks and the crowd loved it. The crowd absolutely loved it. I did not. Next up, Braun Strowman versus Bobby Lashley, which was thankfully quite a lot shorter. This was just a strength guy versus a strength guy, you know, power versus power. There were tests of strength, there were slams and that sort of thing. And there's really not too much to analyse with this one. This again felt like a bit of a Raw match, just like Rollins versus Corbin. Eventually, Braun Strowman picked up the victory, which was probably the right call, with 2 big power slams that he loves to do, and it was fine. It was just as you'd expect it to be. I think the one notable thing maybe was that Lashley posed on a little podium during his entrance, and then when Strowman made his entrance, he lobbed the podium off the side of the stage, and it was quite satisfying and just smashed on the floor. But apart from that, yeah, I can't think of too much to add to this really. Next up, the WWE Championship match between Dolph Ziggler and the champion, Kofi Kingston. This was probably up there with Andrade versus Finn for a match of the night candidate. But at the same time, again, it wasn't anything on a level as high as we know that both of these guys can operate at. In fairness though to both of them, they did look decently motivated and they did put together one of the stronger matches on the show. The ending though was quite weird, it was quite strange, and I'm not quite sure what the point was, or I think I know what the point was, but I don't agree with it, basically. So, a little bit before the finish, Ziggler got into a confrontation with Xavier Woods on the outside and super kicked him, he attacked him. Then, a little bit later on, Woods got his own back, so I think it was an enziguri. Ziggler hit the ropes and Woods hit him. I think it was an enziguri, he hit him in some way, and then the rebound, like Ziggler falling back into the ring, and the ref missed this by the way, of course, but Ziggler falling back into the ring led to him walking straight into the Trouble in Paradise and led directly to the finish. So the babyface's mate, the babyface's tag partner, interfered, attacked the heel and allowed the babyface to pick up a tainted victory. Now, I guess they're going to spin it as like Ziggler deserved it because he attacked Woods on the outside, but it was just a little bit weirdly heelish from Woods. I don't think this is going to lead to a heel turn for Xavier, and I certainly don't want it to lead to a heel turn for him, and I don't think that's where they're going to go with it either. So I struggled at first to understand the point of this. It became a bit clearer after the match. So Ziggler was livid and cut a promo backstage about how annoyed he was and everything, and then it was announced a little bit later on that there's going to be a rematch at Stomping Grounds, inside of a steel cage, which is fine, I suppose, but you know, I guess the whole point is like in a steel cage, Woods can't interfere, but it just seems so strange for the heel to be the one on his own and for the babyface to be the one who was benefiting from outside interference. A little bit odd for me, but again, on balance, probably the second best match of the night. I thought it was okay, despite a little bit of a dodgy finish. Next up, the 50-man Battle Royal, the biggest Battle Royal in WWE history, and man, the ring was absolutely packed. No Hulk Hogan though, which we were worried about, we were fearing it, but thankfully, no, there was no Hulk Hogan in this match, and if he'd been in it, he probably would have won. But no, no, the match wasn't very good, was it, to be honest? It's always interesting, actually, for Battle Royals to see who gets a featured entrance, who gets a showcase entrance, and they're not just part of the gaggle of superstars trotting on down to the ring together. So for this one, I believe we had The Miz, Joe got an entrance of his own, Elias, he sang a little song that was quite funny, Cesaro, which was an interesting one and kind of hopeful, hopefully he is getting a singles push, and also Titus O'Neil, but his was more of a comedic thing because obviously he fell over at the Greatest Royal Rumble, so this time he did a slow walk down to the ring, didn't actually quite slip over, but you know, he was very tentative. And then later on in the match, actually, I think he hid under the ring, ironically, as a way to evade some of the action. So those were the guys who got the featured entrances, and I don't think I've missed anyone. Now, for the majority of this match, it was actually quite hard to make out what was going on, just because there were so many guys in the ring. Like, if we're going to compare it to the Greatest Royal Rumble match, that was far better because of the Royal Rumble format. This was just too hard to decipher what was going on at all, really. EC3 was maybe the first man eliminated, and he was eliminated so fast, and I didn't see it. I just saw him walking around the outside within seconds. I actually wonder if he did a Gail Kim and eliminated himself. Obviously, we've heard reports that he's disgruntled backstage. Who knows? I don't know, but he was gone quickly. There were obviously 49 eliminations, which is far too many to recap one by one, but one that a lot of people mentioned online immediately when it happened and got quite a big reaction from us was Nakamura getting eliminated by Sin Cara. Now, I don't want to throw any undue shade at Sin Cara or anything. I think it's more the fact that in being eliminated by a guy who's really part of the lower card, it illustrates just how far Nakamura has fallen. It wasn't long ago before he was winning the 2018 Royal Rumble, before he was having a title match at WrestleMania, and now he's in this uninspiring tag team with Rusev, which isn't Rusev's fault either, and he just seems to be going nowhere, and it's really sad to see for someone who ended WWE with such hype behind him. Things all boiled down to a final five of Ricochet and Ali, who seem to be working together. Will they be a tag team in the near future on SmackDown? I don't know. That might just be a bit of over speculation, but they were certainly working together in this match. We also had Mansoor, the Performance Center trainee who is originally from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We also had Cesaro and Elias as well. That was the final five. Everyone kind of got eliminated by each other, and it all boiled down to Elias and Mansoor. And Mansoor won, picking up a huge victory, in fairness, given his relative position on the, not even on the card, in the company, and got a genuine huge pop from the crowd. And I know I said that I didn't really like the match very much at the start of this bit of analysis of the video, but at the same time, I think this was probably the best moment of the night, this decision to have Mansoor win. The crowd were clearly overjoyed, legitimately overjoyed for their hometown boy. Not strictly hometown, he's from Riyadh, this was in Jeddah, but from the home country boy. And he cut a great emotional promo afterwards. And I thought, you know what? Out of anyone who could have won the Battle Royal, probably benefits him the most. I think fair play, and hopefully this carries on a bit into his impending NXT career. On the other hand, I hope they don't rely on it too much. I hope they don't kind of always say, this is Mansoor, he won the Battle Royal. I hope it's more just like an initial burst of momentum, and then he can settle into his own character and his own story. And finally, the main event, the dream match, I guess, between Undertaker and Goldberg. And honestly, this was the one I referred to in the intro where I said some of the show was funny bad, like Shane beating Roman, but some of the show was just sad bad, like you couldn't even laugh at it. It was just depressing to see, and this match was absolutely the pinnacle of that. The entrances obviously burned a lot of time. When Goldberg made his entrance, actually, he had a little spot of blood on his head, and it looked as though he'd done that thing that he sometimes does when he headbutts a locker, apparently, or a wall before he comes out. He did it on Raw, I believe, once for a promo segment and was bleeding during his promo. This is what we all thought he'd done, but I think the real reason for it became apparent a little bit into the match. So they squared off, and then Undertaker threw a right hand, and then they were off to the races, sort of. Goldberg hit a spear, and then another spear, and it seemed for a while like maybe there could be enough smoke and mirrors and just big finishes in this match that they could really hide both guys' decreasing ability with age. But after taking the two spears, Undertaker did his sit-up, and Goldberg was like, all right then, okay. And then Taker went for a chokeslam, and Goldberg kind of reversed it, but it was really sloppy, reversed it into a knee bar attempt of sorts, which again wasn't the most smoothly executed move you've ever seen, and then Undertaker made the ropes. A little bit later on, Goldberg missed a spear attempt, hitting the ring post, and was covered in blood because of it. And we thought in the office, and I think we might be right, that that was what the little spot of blood was during his entrance. It was like a pre-prepared cut, kind of like when Vince McMahon got headbutted by Kevin Owens and just got covered in blood. We think it was that sort of kind of trickery going on. But whether it was deliberate or accidental, Goldberg was busted open pretty heavily for the duration of the match thereafter. Taker then, I'm going to say this was the best moment of the match, Taker then hit an old school, which was amazing because he looked to be limping pretty heavily from the start, and as soon as he went up to do old school on Goldberg, we were all like, oh God, be careful, but he nailed it, which is fair enough, but it was like the only nice and impressive moment of what was a really depressing match. Taker would then hit the tombstone on Goldberg, and it was terrifying. We can't quite work out yet whether Goldberg's head actually did hit the canvas on it, but it was close as hell. Goldberg kicked out, and that wasn't even the most memorable botch of the match, if it was indeed a botch, because there was a more obvious and terrifying one a little bit later on. So Goldberg hit another spear and then got Undertaker up for the jackhammer, but couldn't hold him there for long at all, and just went over, and Undertaker just landed, his neck just folded, and it was terrifying to see. Thankfully, it looks like Undertaker might be alright, but it was certainly a scary moment, and the match was just downhill from there. Then in the closing stages, Goldberg went for a tombstone, Undertaker's finisher of course, but then Undertaker tried to do the sit back reversal thing, now you're ready for the tombstone, but they just kind of fell, and everyone was like, oh no, like that was obviously the finish, and they've just messed it up. Then Undertaker just clearly called an audible, hit a choke slam and pinned Goldberg with the choke slam rather than attempting to go for the tombstone again. Probably a wise decision, and they finished the match on that note. And then after the match, it was just so sad to watch, man. Undertaker didn't even attempt to hide his sadness or his frustration with what a bad match that was, and just the look in his eyes, what I got from it was he was just looking around thinking, why did I have that match? I'm way too old for this. That was really bad, and he just looked so disappointed in the occasion and himself and everything. It was just a really heart-wrenching moment, and not a deliberate one, not like when Ric Flair retired. It was like an accidentally heart-wrenching one, because the match was just so bad. So on that rather down note, that was it for WWE Super Showdown 2019 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Once again though, I must say, on a brighter note, a huge thank you to everybody again who donated for our live stream reactions, because of course, as I mentioned, all those proceeds are going to Amnesty International. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. That last match was sad. The rest of the show was kind of nondescript or funny bad, like Shane and Roman. Yeah, if you're gonna think of Taker versus Goldberg and how sad that was, just think of Shane beating Roman instead, and you might have a little chuckle. All the best. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.